Do we have any Cajuns in the audience? No Cajuns.
A lot of people like Cajun food.
Yeah. Close as we are to New Orleans and Louisiana, I'm surprised we don't have any Cajuns.
Most of the people come from there over here won't admit to you.
Well, you, of course, know about Flip Wilson, but why is my click not working? There we go. Do you know about Justin Wilson? Well, I need to apologize in advance for this little clip. And if you know Justin, we may have already heard this story. And it has nothing to do with our class, except that we're talking about walking on water. So I want to tell you right now that if you're offended in any way, don't text or email the elders. Text me, because I don't want the elders to know about this. All right? All right. So we're going to talk about walking on water.
Lanny, you talked about walking on the water. Mandy and Penny Neal and I went to Arkansas to see the Passion play, and it was too long a line, so they were having.
Hang on, Judy.
Jesus.
We got people online that want to hear this. Start over.
Start over. Oh my. Penny Neal and Mandy and I went to Arkansas to see the Passion play, but it was too crowded. So we went on down, and they said, if you go right down there, you can see Jesus walking on water. So, you know, we were nosy about it, and we went down there. And the reason he could walk on the water, there was little bitty stones just barely above. And somebody screamed at him, and there was a big old snake coming right for him. Boy, he walked on the water.
Maybe he ran on the water. Well, I don't know if Jesus knew how to swim or not. And I don't know if there were any stones or not. But what I do know is he walked on the water. So we pick up our text from the Gospels of John and Mark. And again, all through this today, like I said last week, you know, we're picking and choosing, or I say we, F. LaGard Smith, picked and chose little phrases from each of the Gospels to piece this together. So if it sounds a little bit convoluted, it probably is, but it's a way of having a continuity of the three gospel accounts. So after the people saw the sign Jesus performed, and that's what we talked about last week, the feeding of the multitude, they began to say, surely this is the prophet who is to come into the world. And immediately Jesus made his disciples get into the boat and go on ahead of him to Bethsaida. John says to Capernaum. They're both right there together. I mean, they went back to the area of their home base. And Jesus dismissed the crowd. And Jesus, knowing that they intended to come and make him king by force, withdrew again to a mountain by himself. By now it was dark, and Jesus had not yet joined them. That is, he hadn't joined the apostles who were where? Out on the lake, rowing. And they're rowing very, very hard and not getting very far because, as is not unusual on what we call the Sea of Galilee, which is a really big lake, the wind had come up, and they were rowing against the wind, and the wind was winning. So that's the scene. It's night, it's dark. We'll pick up the text in a little bit and see that it was somewhere going toward dawn, but not to dawn. And Jesus comes out walking toward them on the water. So this is the way that the Chosen has illustrated this particular story. Don't let me go. This is the text. He saw the disciples straining at the oars because the wind was against them and the waters grew rough. And about the fourth watch of the night, this is using the Roman method of timing, so it was somewhere between 3 a.m. and 6 a.m. And one of the other translations, or not translations, one of the other Gospels say shortly before dawn. He went out to them walking on the lake. When they had rowed 3.5 miles, they saw Jesus approaching the boat walking on the water. He was about to pass them by, but when they saw him walking on the lake, they thought he was a ghost. They cried out because they all saw him and were terrified. Immediately he spoke to them and said, "Take courage, it is I. Don't be afraid." Just a little word about ghosts, and David, you may want to add more to this, but the Greek word here is phantasma, which we get our word phantom from. It refers to an apparition, a ghost or a spirit, a phantom. I'm told that the Jews considered water, deep water, dark water, to be the dwelling place of demons. If you remember when we talked about Jesus at Caesarea Philippi, there's a place there, a big cave opening, and in that cave, waters came out, and that cave was called the Gate of Hades, the Gate of Hell. And the belief was that Pan, the Greek god, would come up out of the water through that, and that's where they built their temple to him. So if that's true, it would be reasonable that they would see this apparition out there and immediately associate it with something ghostly and something evil. Because of that, some people have suggested, and I don't know if this is true, but some people have suggested that it's quite possible that they really didn't even know how to swim. It sounds kind of strange to say, since several of them were fishermen and they lived on the water. But when Peter went under, he didn't seem like he was a very strong swimmer. I know that when we get to the post-resurrection time and Jesus is standing on the shore and Simon sees him, he jumps out of the boat and goes to him, and he was out some distance from shore. Now, I don't know whether that required him swimming or not. Maybe he could swim, but anyway, most people that I've read agree that the Jewish people were not very comfortable out in the deep waters. Do you have anything to add to that, David? So it kind of makes sense that when they saw this, that their first response would be, that's a ghost. That would have been kind of unusual for the Sadducees. I don't know how they would have reconciled that, because they didn't believe in things spiritual. They didn't believe in angels and ghosts and demons and resurrection. But for the Pharisees, they believed in all of that and in the afterlife. And I think that probably most of the disciples, if they came out of one of those two groups, it would have been out of the Pharisee tribe before their coming to Jesus. I don't think any of them struggled with understanding or believing in things of a spiritual nature and things of a resurrection nature. So Peter says, "Lord, if it's you, tell me to come to you on the water." And Jesus says, "Come." Peter got down out of the boat, walking on the water, coming toward Jesus. But when he saw the wind, he was afraid, and beginning to sink, cried out, "Lord, save me." Immediately Jesus reached out his hand and caught him. "You have little faith," he said. "Why did you doubt?" And when they climbed into the boat, the wind died down. Some people have wanted to criticize Peter for his lack of faith. I've got a real close friend over in Nederland, in Port Arthur, Beaumont area, that if you say anything negative about Peter in any regard, he'll get in your face right now. He does not like that. And the reason that well, many reasons, but Peter's kind of his hero. And when you talk about Peter not displaying much faith when he got out of the boat, and Jesus said, "Oh, you of little faith." How many people got out of the boat? One. Who was it? Peter. Peter got out of the boat. He was the only one who got out of the boat. And he got out of the boat with all, according to the chosen, with all the rest of them saying, "Don't do it. You're an idiot." So who had the faith and who didn't have the faith? Fear is a result of doubt overcoming faith. When did he become afraid? When he began to doubt. The doubt is what overcame his faith. Does that have an application for us today? Are there times when we are afraid because we are of little faith? I would say that that's probably pretty universally true. In this case, we see a visualization of the doubt coming as a result of what? Taking your eyes off of Jesus, losing your focus. He was doing fine as long as he had his gaze fixed on Jesus. When he turned and started looking at the waves, and when he started paying attention to the wind, took his focus away from Jesus, down he went. Applications, maybe? Could that ever be the case in your life? That you lose your focus, and as a result, you begin to have anxieties and fears that maybe you wouldn't have had otherwise. Certainly, we have a demonstration here that what Peter did was not by his power, was it? Sometimes we have to do things by the power of Jesus, not by our own power. Things that we don't think we can do and probably can't do, but with the hand of Jesus and with Jesus in focus before us, maybe we can. That was the case with Peter. You think Peter took a little risk when he got out of the boat? Do we sometimes need to be willing to leave safe ground for the sake of Jesus? To launch out beyond our comfort zone? It's hard to do that, isn't it? We are comfortable in our comfort zone, and we're uncomfortable out of it. Peter stepped out of his comfort zone. Granted, his comfort zone wasn't all that comfortable at the moment, but it was still his comfort zone. He was still in the safest place he knew to be, and he left it. He took a risk. Sometimes we are called on to do that. Nothing teaches like experience, and sometimes it takes more than one time. Experience is not always learned the first time. Sometimes it takes more than one time. There's a little bit of that we'll see in this event here, because what had the apostles just experienced prior to this event? What had they experienced? The feeding of the multitude. I mean, how powerful a demonstration was that? 5 loaves and two small fish, feeding 5,000 plus. So why should they be so frightened when they've just seen that? They've had a learning experience, but it hadn't taken yet. And the text will talk about that in just a minute. But nonetheless, I think Peter learned something by stepping out of the boat. Even in his failure, he learned something. And sometimes that's what it takes for us. Some other, yes, sir. Don't say anything bad about Peter.
Okay. In the storyline that The Chosen did, it brought it more home to me, because when you talk about losing focus on Jesus, how many times in healing or something we have cried out, God, why did you let so-and-so die? Why did you saved this person over here and you did this? And in the storyline that they created, Peter and Eden had just gone through big trials, and they spoke to that. And so it was like, you're still taking care of these Gentiles. I saw all that stuff, but why didn't you take care of me? And basically he said, you don't know my ways. Sort of like the story of Job. You don't know what's behind everything I've got. You just have to believe and have real faith in me that I've got it covered.
Absolutely. And if you've seen that full episode, then you know that in the storyline, Eden has had a miscarriage. So that's part of Peter's real anger and angst at this time. He feels like that he has not been treated fairly by Jesus.
God had two different things. God, we go to church and He will protect us and healing, and then the other, God is control over us, and He then God didn't didn't take care of us, and then God didn't, as at the other thing, He takes care of us all night.
Yes, sir. He has control over us, and He protects us. Very good.
And He won't leave us or forsake us.
Never leave us nor forsake us. Amen. Thank you. So some comments concerning Jesus' response to this. Jesus saved Peter first and then rebuked him. First of all, He grabbed his hand and pulled him up out of the water. And then He said, "O ye of little faith." Like Jeff said, He protects us, and he has control over us. So if Peter's faith was small, and Jesus said it was, and what does that say about the others who were in the boat? And what does that say about us? And I don't know about you, but one of the powerful moments of this particular clip was that little close-up video of Jesus' hand going down into the water and Peter's hand taking hold of it. What's the symbolism? What's the lesson for you and me of Jesus taking our hand, of us grabbing onto the hand of Jesus? There's a common theme in our scripture and in our liturgy.
I was just going to say art. If you look back through the ages of renditions of Jesus or whatever, so many times he's reaching out to the lost. I mean, period. He's reaching out. It's like, here's my hand. All you got to do is grab hold of it and just trust in me. But that's in our artwork from the ages past.
It's in our artwork and it's in our music.
Not that I'm all that smart, but I don't think it says anything about the others in the boat.
About what?
I don't think it says anything about the others in the boat and their faith, because in this particular case, the emphasis in Scripture was on the fact that Christ was going to depend on Peter to help him establish his church. The others may have had just as much faith or not enough faith. Maybe this is an awful thing to say. Maybe they had more sense than to get out of the boat. But really, truly, Peter did things out of impulse, and then Christ saved him. Mm-hmm. We do things by impulse that we sometimes do and then pray later. But I don't think it means that the others didn't have faith. They just weren't being tried by the same thing.
Well, it's certainly true. They didn't get out of the boat, so he didn't ask them to. They weren't turning down a request of Jesus. Peter did it on his own. Then he climbed into the boat with them, and the wind died down. They were completely amazed, for they had not understood about the significance of the loaves. Their hearts were hardened, or some translations say their hearts were closed or stupid, or their hearts could not grasp it. I think stupid was a little bit of a harsh translation, but that's just me. The hardening here, this is not the kind of hardening that we talk about with Pharaoh or with Israel as a nation. It's not that kind of a hardening. It's just more of a, as other translations say, it was more of their hearts were just closed. It took more than one experience to get through their hard heads, I guess, because they had just seen the feeding of the multitude with the loaves and the fish, and yet they were just amazed that Jesus could walk on water. How much more power did it take for Jesus to walk on water than to feed multitudes and multitudes with 5 loaves and 2 small fishes? But they hadn't made that connection. And of course, that's going to be true all through the Gospels. They're on a learning journey, and it's a step by step. And they're not going to get it until after Jesus' resurrection. And certainly not until after his resurrection and his ascension. Then those who were in the boat worshiped him, saying, "Truly you are the Son of God." I don't know if it surely wasn't just dawning on them that he was now the Son of God. They've seen many things to imply this. But this was another step, another layer, one more iteration. And they felt compelled to voice that conclusion. What do we learn from Jesus walking on water? Faith and trust for one, right? Are we willing to launch out of the boat, metaphorically, when it seems like the way forward is not very apparent, when the way forward is maybe not as comfortable or as safe or as sure as what we would like for it to be? courage in the face of fear. Whether it was faith or whatever, it took a lot of courage for Peter to get out of the boat. It was counterintuitive. It wasn't the thing that common sense told him to do. Of course, we talked already about focus on Jesus.